Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about what the Talmud talks about and why current Zionists have the beliefs that they currently espouse and what that means just for the world in general. And so we're going to start with Keith Woods here talking about the Talmud. And so I've talked about this in other videos, but I remember, and I will completely admit to this, that a few years ago, I thought that modern Jewish people believed in the Torah, which is the Old Testament. In the Christian Bible, it's the whole Old Testament. And so Christians believe in the Old and New Testament, before and after Jesus is how we would probably put it. And then the Jewish people, as I thought, believed in the Old Testament. And they didn't believe in Jesus yet, and they were just going to come around to it eventually, is what Christians really thought. What I did not understand was, one, how modern Jewish populations are, as far as we can tell, not really ethnically related or very loosely ethnically related to ancient Jewish populations. It seems more likely that the current Palestinian population is the descendants of the ethnic Jews of the biblical times. Another thing that I didn't fully recognize a few years ago was that the modern rabbinical tradition, rabbis of contemporary times, are actually the descendants of the Pharisees. And I didn't realize just, well, one, that the Talmud existed, and two, the types of things that the Talmud really talks about at the time. I did genetic testing. I was very curious about my history. I thought I was all Southern Italian, but then I started to put my genetic information in various algorithms, principal component analysis types of algorithms, and found that I was Italian, Greek, and Jewish. And so I'm like, okay, I need to explore Judaism because I don't know as much as I would like to know about it. I thought it was just studying the Old Testament, things like that. And I found out about the Talmud, and it's a horrendous book. One thing to mention is actually modern day Judaism is actually the youngest of the Abrahamic religions. People think it's the oldest one, but actually the Talmud was written in, I think it was like the 1300s, something like that. Maimonides in Spain was like the main person who had to do with the Talmud. And so I should mention, though, that it is considered the oral word of God. And so the Old Testament is considered the written word of God. And then supposedly the rabbis for hundreds upon hundreds of years kept the oral word of God. And then eventually in the 1300s they ended up writing down the Talmud. And so what does the Talmud espouse? Well, the Talmud says that Jesus is in hell boiling in feces, excrement, and he is one of the three archenemies of Judaism. Okay, so just to reiterate, at least Islam believes that Jesus was a prophet and was supportive of Allah. In modern day Judaism, they believe Jesus is one of the three arch enemies of Judaism and is boiling in a vat of poop. Okay. The Talmud espouses that Mary was an adulteress and Jesus was the illegitimate child of a Roman soldier. Okay, so just besmirching both Jesus and Mary's name there. It also espouses that Jesus practiced black magic and was sexually promiscuous. Christianity is an orgiastic cult whose practitioners engage in cannibalism. That's what the Talmud says, and there are multiple sources here showing that, and that's what I've found in my own study of the Talmud. Okay, so modern day Judaism, the religion, it's the youngest of the three Abrahamic religions. It's the only one of the three that has hostility towards Jesus. I should also mention, the Jewish population that wrote the Talmud, supposedly the Word of God, the oral Word of God, they wrote it during a time when they were a subversive element within other societies. And so it's written in such a way that it shows people how to I don't know how I want to get into this. It shows people how to be subversive elements in a society. I think that's the PC way, politically correct way that I can say that. So it's not a good book. I would encourage you. You don't have to take my word for it. Feel free to go read the Talmud. And so we can see that it ends up, showing exactly what we'd expect it to show. It ends up leading to beliefs that we would expect it to lead to, the Talmud, where people who believe in the Talmud believe in being subversive elements within a society and overthrowing and opposing the majority elements within a society. And so here we see a post by End Wokeness, David Collier, who is a Zionist, saying, "I'm so tired of old white supremacists." Remember, the Jewish faith is very hostile towards Christians in general, who happen to be, in America at least, primarily white. And so David Collier here, a Zionist, saying, "I'm so tired of old white supremacists who jump on anyone who doesn't like as lily white, who doesn't look as lily white as they do. You're clearly all just Islamophobes. You should look beyond your anti-Black, African, Middle Eastern agenda, BAME, and blatant Muslim hatred, embrace the wonders of diversity." So this Zionist is saying, he's encouraging really hostility towards white people in this post. And then you see, that was from 2020, okay? You see 3 years later, in 2023, he writes, "When I was growing up, we used to watch Islamists screaming for the death of Israel on the streets of Cairo, Tehran, and Baghdad. Now we see them on the streets of London, Paris, and New York. Today is another of these days. London once again taken over by the Islamist anti-Semitism." Okay, so you could clearly see, and we've talked about this in other contexts, Tucker Carlson has talked about this, and Candace Owen has talked about this, that there's been anti-white hostility that has been fomented by Zionists within academia, and major Zionist billionaires have been providing money for these forces that are hostile towards white people. And I've faced this in academia as well. I know people who have sued and won against public institutions who have faced discrimination for being white, for being Christian, for being straight, for being male. Okay, this has been going on and been supported by Zionist people. And all of a sudden, when the forces of Islam are working to support Palestine by debunking things that the Zionists are saying, suddenly multiculturalism, diversity is not a value anymore for them. And they are withholding funding from major universities. They're espousing how there needs to be immigration reform, even though they've been the primary promoters of immigration. Elon Musk has talked about this, how they are going out of their way to foment hatred against white people. The Zionists, the primary strand of the Jewish faith is promoting anti-white hatred. I will come out and say that. It's worth remembering, though, that it's obviously not all Jewish people. There are a ton of great Jewish people: Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, Glenn Greenwald. I'm at least like partially, some genetics I say half Jewish. Norman Finkelstein, a lot of great Jewish people. What's worth remembering is the Zionists have taken control of Judaism, the religion, and they've pushed out. There are other Jewish factions that used to be larger. I believe one is called like the Karaites, and there's only like a few hundred of them, but they believed and they focused on the Old Testament, the Torah, whereas modern Judaism and modern Zionism focuses on the Talmud, which is, it's very hostile towards essentially everyone who isn't Jewish. And so we see here what happens with that promotion of anti-white hatred throughout the West. And more examples of Zionists who hate white people, I guess is a good way to put it. Gad Saad, who very irrational person, pretended to be a rational actor, a part of the intellectual dark web. He says, "Jew hater," saying, "Why are you defending Israel, you Zionist pig? I thought that you're from Canada." And Gad Saad replies in this artificial example, "Well, I defend liberal democracies. I'm Jewish and I have a ton of family in Israel. By the way, your name is Roscoe Jethro. You're from Arkansas. Why do you have a from the river to the sea tattooed on your forehead?" And the Jew hater says, "STFU, Jew Zionist." Okay, so the thing to point out here is he's calling the Jew hater Roscoe Jethro, and he's got a lot of flack for this because from Arkansas, because what he's doing is he's punching down towards poor white people in America who literally are the only demographic that supports him. I've talked about this in other videos where Christian Zionists are primarily straight white Christians, obviously. And here you see him attacking the ethnicity that primarily supports him. And they talk about this a little bit further down, where we have this piece saying the religious groups' ratings of each other. American Jewish people hate evangelical Christians the most, and evangelical Christians love American Jewish people the most. And you can see that exactly emphasized in this post here by Godsod, who is of Jewish descent, who very clearly hates evangelical Christian whites. I mean, this example is a blatant example talking about literally the one demographic that actually supports his cause. I've been trying to persuade them to not support his cause, but they do. So let's just read what this says. I'm going to not read the entire thing, but let's read some excerpts here just to get a taste of what the comment section is like for this. You don't find it rather disingenuous to blame the race and spate of anti-Semitism on working class whites in Arkansas, which, considering the evangelical love of Jews, is statistically absurd. After all, the footage of people chanting from the river to the sea are not Roscoe. So just really racist language coming out of God's side here. So Godfrey Roberts, I've talked about his work a number of times. Godfrey saying, so what's the plan? You've blown your... I can't talk about that line. How will you maintain your 38% share of the serious financial crime market? You support democracy, you say. Is that why you don't have any? The center point of our research is the economic elite, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see. You're making fun of evangelical Southern Christians and your laws of caricature, Roscoe Jethro from Arkansas, or of probably the largest, most influential and enthusiastic group of non-Jewish supporters. Why would you alienate natural allies like this, unprovoked no less? Scott G says, I don't think Roscoe Jethro from Arkansas is a big threat here, and I think it's pretty bizarre that you do. So yeah, just really emphasizing, what I'm trying to emphasize here is just how much they hate Christian, white people and Christians. It's very overt. I saw this in academia a lot. They really espouse this. They really promote this as much as possible. And you can see contrast between various posts where you'll see people of, I'll just come out and say, you'll see people of Jewish descent who, and I will remind you, I'm of half Jewish descent. You see people of Jewish descent who will say how they're white and how bad white people are. And then whenever there's criticism of them for being a white person, they say, I'm not white, I'm Jewish. And you'll see that in multiple different social media posts. Side by side, they could be a few minutes apart, it could be a few months apart, a few years apart. But you can clearly see that they actively go out of their way to foment anti-white hatred, pretending to be white, and then they say they're not white later on in order to avoid the consequences of their actions. And we're going to talk about this in another video, but Elon Musk even commented on this, saying that this is happening quite frequently. So I just wish the Roscoe Jethros of the world would recognize that I am trying to look out for their interests and that these people hate you. They hate you. They absolutely hate you. And you have to recognize that they hate your existence and make sure that you don't support people that hate your existence. So God's side here, I like reading some of his work. I still watch his, I think he has a podcast. I've watched his podcast quite a few times in the past. I find his work to be very influential in my thought, in my thinking. And I will continue to listen to him and other people I disagree with on topics. But you just have to remember, people like Godsod do not like evangelical Christians, and they do not like white people. It's very, very overt. This type of example is very overt. Or at least, I should say, that is the interpretation I'm getting from how he talks about that. And the weird thing is, I've actually looked up Godsod, his posts, and he actually talks about Roscoe a lot. Like, he's very denigrating. He talks about like bluegrass music bands and how awful they are. He actually has a history, a years-long history of talking about his hatred of Roscoe. So I feel like someone named Roscoe has slept with his wife or something, because his hatred of poor working-class white people is obscene. It's absurd. And he has done this consistently for years, from what I could see. You're welcome to go to his webpage, click search on Twitter, and type in Roscoe, and you'll come up with a number of entries showing he just doesn't like people named Roscoe. He doesn't like working class white people, is essentially what I interpret him as saying here. So anyways, difficult topics to talk about. I think someone has to talk about it though, so I'm willing to go out on a limb and do it. So if you found this video to be helpful, informative, if you found me to be courageous coming out and saying these types of things, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us in the algorithm. Please subscribe to our channel, YouTube and Rumble for more content. Please leave us a comment in the comment box below. Questions, concerns, critiques. I do read all of them. Thank you for watching, and I do hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.